Good evening. Welcome to a fun and thrilling Saturday night. I'm Kat, this is Buckets, and my best friend and like a brother, Leon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm
That's good.
surprised I'm actually still awake. Well, I did have a lie down, but I'm awake now.
So tonight's conversation is going to be quite a fun one. We are talking about the year 2000. Now, I've been planning this podcast for a while, so here we go.
For 2,000 years.
No.
Oh, geez.
So
Oh,
the
hang on.
first question is, what expectations did we have on the year 2000 but didn't actually come true? And the first one I can think of is when they said, oh, Y2K, all the computers are going to shut down, internet's going to shut down, nothing's going to run anymore, everything's going to collapse.
Yeah. And look, I remember that night on New Year's Eve when basically my father's friends literally
Yeah.
asked all their kids to turn off all their devices because they were worried something bad was going to happen. But, you know, nothing bad happened. I do remember, though, in the 80s, though, everyone was expecting us to be in flying cars.
Yes, that too.
And I was really looking forward to that. I was
Me
like,
too, actually.
you know,
Living like the Jetsons.
yeah, living like the Jetsons. And the thing is, technically we do have flying cars and we call them Airbuses, but they're just airplanes, which is
Isn't
a
that
little
Airbnb
disappointing.
these days?
It's a bit disappointing. I mean, like I expected to have my own car that would look like the DeLorean and then just go flying around. I don't even have my own car, so that's a disappointment.
What do you think, Leon?
I don't have my own car either, so I'm with you on that one.
What do you think?
Definitely. You know what? We actually, if I remember right, we actually did put that theory to the test, that Y2K thing. But as far as if I can remember it right, I'm not exactly sure if this is correct because that was like 21 years ago. It actually took us back to 1980.
Yes, but like I just remember. I'm sorry that I've made that example, so that's my fault for doing that. But I just remember that everything in the 80s, right? Everyone was aiming for the year 2000, and the year 2000 was meant to mean absolutely all this great futuristic technology, and you know,
Holographs.
and there was also all sorts of great things that were meant to happen in the year 2000 that people in the 80s predicted, and it just never came around, and I'm quite disappointed. So screw you, 2000s. You've ruined my life.
It seems to be the only. Yeah, it seems to be the only ones that are accurate are those that the Simpsons predict because they predict a lot of things and ends up happening.
That's because
I think my favorite one was Fox Studios being owned by Walt Disney, and wouldn't you know it? They are now.
Speaking of the year 2000, did you know that the PS2 came out in the year 2000?
I used to have a PlayStation 2 because the PlayStation 1 would have came out around 1995 or something around that time.
Microsoft entered the home console market with the Xbox as well.
Yes,
and the Nintendo GameCube as well.
So I remember the Nintendo 64. So what year did that come out? Was that 2000?
Nintendo 64, that was prior. That was like 80s or
I think that would have been around 94
no, it wasn't 80s,
or something.
because that wasn't around in the 80s.
It was 90s.
I don't think it was the 90s either. I think it was 2000s because the first time I played it at my friend Andrew McClay's house, and we only played that when we were in high school. And so 2000.
Well, you wouldn't believe it. The Nintendo 64 came out in 1996.
Damn it! I was 4 years off.
Okay. So
I hate to burst your bucket.
So the games that actually came out in the year 2000 is Diablo 2, Command and Conquer, Red Alert.
I love playing. I admit I'm one of those people that play Command and Conquer Red Alert. I was a boss at that game on the PC.
I remember the first time we got. I remember my friend got the first one, the normal Command and Conquer, the first one, and then Red Alert came out, and I was addicted to that game. In fact, I even heard about friends of mine that would actually hack the system to hack how much.
They need to hack the system. You're kidding.
Yeah. So
You are kidding.
yeah, that was the best. Honestly, there was a few games like it, but I absolutely loved that game. Everything about it was just amazing.
Also, we had Legend of Zelda, The Sims, and we had several other games that I couldn't write down because I was too slow. But
I
those are
I
the,
love The Sims. I used to play The Sims as
oh
well,
my God,
and
I got
also
so
the
bored.
Legend of you mentioned the Legend of Zelda. Robin Williams, it's a fascinating fact that
He
he
named his
actually
daughter
named his
Zelda.
daughter after the Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
Yes,
That
that's
is
I
such
heard.
a mad stat. That one, I loved it.
Also, also, also,
I would have
also.
been pissed if I was named after a video game. Oh, but then again, my full name is Philip Andrew Cheng, so I guess I'm named after Pac-Man.
Also, the music of that time. The music of that time was, you had I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys, you had U2 with A Beautiful Day, Bon Jovi, It's My Life, and Sync with It's Gonna Be Me, Eminem, Real Slim Shady, Lucky by Britney Spears,
Oh yeah.
and other song choices as well. So we're looking into the year 2000 with the trends. Speaking of trends, we've got frosted lip gloss. As we all know, trucker hats were very popular. Low-rise jeans, lace-up jeans, jeans with no back pockets, jeans with bedazzled back pockets, popcorn shirts, tattooed neck chokers, halter tops, pants with messages on the back side, and you had airbrush shirts and denim everything.
You know what I actually do remember? Do you remember Keppers that came out? I loved my Keppers, and I got them in the year 2000. And they were denim Keppers. They weren't like your usual Keppers that you got. And I just loved them because every time I walked, I just felt like an absolute gangster. I loved it. From the
I
streets.
was never one for fashion sense. Obviously, now I'm still not one for fashion sense.
Well, you look very
Oh, and by the way, just to clear up any rumors, I'm actually at my home with a wallpaper in the background. Okay, so you don't need to worry about
Doesn't look
anybody
like a
calling the
wallpaper
cops.
to me. It looks like you're in New York.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Next question. How did the Sydney Olympic Games change us as a society?
Oh, I remember watching that. I think the announcement was back in 1994 or something, if I remember right. I remember because I stayed up for it because I was one of those people because
Me too.
I thought we had a chance, right? And when it was announced, man, I was so excited, man. I was only 14. I got a chance to hold the flag. Sorry, not the flag, the torch. So I got a chance to hold it.
Wow. Well, I actually had a friend of mine who called Landon Lynon, and he actually ran with the torch, actually.
Oh, nice.
And I remember that there was like those running competitions that you do to basically see who basically lasts the longest. I was in detention at that time, so I didn't get to compete in it, but Landon got it. And he got all sorts of stuff with it. He got like obviously the torch, but they gave him duvet covers, they gave him a uniform, they gave him all sorts of stuff. And yeah, I mean, he lived the life of an Olympian, even though he wasn't an Olympian. He got a really good deal out of it. So, but I do remember I think the vice principal basically just said, "Oh yes, there is a competition to carry the torch, but we do have to stretch with people that you do have to be fit and not fat."
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I think he literally said that, and Mr. McCormack, I hope you're out there, and I hope you're freaking proud. Anyway,
I think for me, what changed us as a society is our tourism boomed during the 2000 Olympics because it helped open
Oh,
the door to other
absolutely.
nations around the world, not just Commonwealth nations, but other nations to come visit our beautiful shores, to come see Australia, not just Sydney and New South Wales, but Queensland and Adelaide and Northern Territory and Western Australia and Melbourne and Dubbo and all these places. It opened the door wide for tourists to come and see our beautiful country and what it can offer them for the time that they're there, and how much money they can pump into our society, and how we can represent our country really well. And
And
it
and
really,
it looks like Queensland is set to get the 2032 Olympics or whatever one that they're getting,
they've already had,
Queensland or
didn't
Brisbane.
they have the Commonwealth Olympics in 2018? So
Commonwealth and Olympic are two
yeah,
different
I know,
games.
but are they holding in Brisbane again, the actual Olympics?
Didn't Melbourne one stage have one?
Years ago, I think 1950 something.
I think it might have been 1956 or something.
Yeah, I was seeing that number. Whoa, we just started the same year.
But as far as the Sydney Olympics go, you remember when that joint was first open? Um, People got a chance to walk around, the ground level, and
Yeah.
just to walk around and have a look at all the at how high it really was. I was actually in that crowd, to walk around and just look around and just see how high that stadium was.
Right.
That blew my mind. I
Well,
loved it.
It's funny you should actually mention that because was doing hospitality at TAFE at that time, and I did it through high school because that was a program that was offered. I think they still offer it today. And my first work placement was with Olympic Stadium for the Olympics. So I worked at
Oh,
the Olympic
nice.
Games for the 2 weeks, and then they kept employing me, and I ended up becoming a team leader after that.
Oh.
So I actually worked for Olympic Stadium for 12 years, basically. They even gave me a medal for it. So it just goes to show if you don't win an Olympic medal at the Stadium Australia, you can probably get a medal that has an Olympic thing on it for working in hospitality.
To be honest, when we held the 2000 Olympic Games, it was the IOC chairman said it was the greatest games ever.
Wasn't that
And
Juan Antonio Samaranch?
yes, absolutely. And I believe it's been long overdue. And I believe Australia really needs to bring it back home. We haven't had it in 21 years. I mean, London had it for 4 years. USA's had it for a couple of years in between. So I just think it's time we brought it back home to our shores.
If I also remember right, didn't we have a moth infestation at one stage during the 2000 Olympic Games? I was half expecting Juan Antonio Samaranch.
Yes, that's
I was actually you remember that guy Juan Antonio Samaranch.
Yeah, I do.
I was half expecting him to say, apart from the moths, this has been the greatest game ever.
I remember that. But do you know what? Do you know which country hasn't held it? And
Who?
that is New Zealand.
I'm sure
Don't get me wrong, but is that country big enough to be able to hold it? It should be able to, but the problem is the earthquakes.
Yeah, that's the other thing, but they haven't held it yet. So I think.
Yeah, but you could make the same argument about Japan. I mean, how many earthquakes of Japan has, but they're holding an Olympic Games as well. So, I mean,
One's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Next question. What technological growth started to appear in the year 2000? And from my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, and you can fact check this. If I remember, Steve Jobs brought out, I think after the Lisa was the Macintosh. And what's his name? Bill Gates brought out the personal home computer.
Okay, so yes, so there was so the PC was always around, but it started to really blossom because the government made a deal where that there was like a cap of how much money they could make off a laptop or a computer, and that's the other thing. Laptops were becoming more and more regular. So what happened was this. So unlike, I can't remember the exact cost of how much it would have cost back in the day when it started to explode, but I do know that computers were getting cheaper. And so one way that everyone started to get more and more computers was that computers were starting to be put in schools. And I was lucky enough to be in a tech class because they only really ran it for 3 years, for the first 3 years when I was there. And then few years later after that, my school, every single person had a laptop that was basically used for absolutely everything. I mean, before we had a diary that was about this big, right? and you still had to write stuff in. But I was in a class where we just used computers for everything. So that was one of the things that the year 2000 brought, was more technology to a wider range of people, as opposed to the lucky few that might have a computer back in the day.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Apple II was it the Apple I or Apple II was still sellable during that time, because Steve Jobs was making computers that were fantastic, but the IBM was bringing the home personal computer into every business and into every home. The IBM, I mean, don't forget the Commodore 64 was still raging, but then times are changing, and you had the Apple I and the Apple II and the Microsoft IBM, and you had other sort of computers. And
no, the Commodore 64 pretty much reached its end around 1993-ish. As far as the Apple II goes, the Apple II came out in 1977.
Okay, so I'm guessing, was it? I'm not sure. That's what I'm saying. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So, all right. So
and also the Apple II ceased operation in 1993.
Okay, but wasn't there? So I do remember when Apple started to kind of redevelop itself, because there was like a consensus that even though Apple had more power, it wasn't very popular because it was actually more expensive than PC. And so then what happened was it started to become more stylish
to own an Apple.
And then all of a sudden, everyone wanted Apple stuff.
Like Apple iPods, MacBooks had started becoming the trend. And Apple back then, from Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, came out with the greatest products. And Bill Gates was still trying to compete. And if we remember,
the iPod came out in 2001.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. Fact check. If I'm not mistaken, again, did we still have the dial-up in 2000?
The what?
The dial-up internet.
Yes, we did. We still had dial-up. No one had broadband. And I still remember the thing that we basically have. But actually, you know what? I also remember that if you remember the Matrix came out in the year 2000 as well. And basically, I actually switched. You know how the line where Neo basically goes to the phone booth and goes, "Hi."
Don't spoil it. I haven't seen it.
I'm here. You haven't seen
You have not seen the Matrix? Oh my God, you are so behind.
Honestly, what kind of nerd
I'm
are
a nerd,
you?
but I'm not that much of a nerd.
Oh.
And also, there was an internet connection that did come out around the early 2000s. That was ADSL.
That's right.
That originally came out around 1998, but it started to expand at roughly 2001 before it went to ADSL2 back in 2002.
Next question. How did the education change in the year 2000? How did education change in the year 2000?
Well, actually, I like to think that there was a lot of things that changed. Like I mentioned, the laptops. Kids had laptops in laptop classes and stuff like that. That was one of the things that changed. Also, disciplinary stuff changed as well. You couldn't.
Discipline. Yeah, get out of here.
You couldn't actually beat up anyone in school, because you could be prosecuted for that. And you know what else changed? You couldn't actually get a detention for swearing anymore. Because that was considered something that a parent does or a parent teaches, so they couldn't regulate it. So all of a sudden, you had these kids that were allowed to swear, and you couldn't get punished for it anymore. That was one of the things that actually changed. Another thing that changed, I noticed in Catholic schools, was that I remember when my brothers would say, "Oh, you had to stand up when your principal entered the room." That was just something everyone did, like automatically. You just had to stand up on command, kind of thing.
Really?
And when I was in the year 2000, no one did that unless you were asked to do it. So everyone was just working, doing their work, copying off the board, and then the principal would just show up and the teacher would go, "All right, boys, everyone stand up." Whereas before, you just stood up whenever you saw the principal. That was it, kind of thing.
When I was in school back in the 80s, now I'm showing my age. We never really stood up for the principal, I guess. I can't really remember it, but I don't ever remember a time where we actually did that.
I
But
think
as
it's more of
far
a
as
Catholic
changes
school.
go in 2000, definitely the schools became more reliable on computers. That's for sure. We started ditching the bloody books,
Blackboard.
and the blackboard. We started ditching the blackboard. We started ditching the books and the pens and the
That's
paper
right.
for laptops.
Yep.
Yeah, and I also
That annoyed me. Let's
I
get back to some old school.
Yes, I
well,
think so.
I actually, one thing I actually remember was the library stuff. So
Oh, yeah, me
the
too.
library actually changed. So before, the library was a really quiet place that you went to read just some books. Then all of a sudden, the library was the most most comfortable, most warm,
Quiet.
but that's the funny thing. It wasn't quiet anymore. There is no such thing as quiet in the library when I went to school. Everyone who went to the library talked openly, and they weren't told to shut up, and they didn't get detentions for speaking. In fact, they were encouraged to talk in the library. So that was actually one of the things that I noticed changed. Like the thing quiet in the library really didn't exist anymore. That was one of the things that was beginning to change, because more people used computers in the library. More, the library was being more used for different things other than just reading, and it really became an essential part of the school. So that was actually one of the things that did change.
Next question. Did the world become bigger or smaller because of the year 2000?
I think it became smaller. I think it
Yeah,
became,
I tend to agree.
Me
I
too.
agree with buckets. I think
Yeah,
it
I do
became
too.
smaller and it became more scared, especially in 2001. We became more vulnerable than we'd ever been.
I do remember I was on when we got internet in our home for the first time, and I think you know how the Palestinian Israeli thing has been going on for a while, right? So I had a friend of mine who was a Muslim living in Palestine, and she basically said, "Oh my God, my brother's been shot," right? And then I
Can we
had
say this on a podcast?
Yes, we can. And then there was another friend of mine who was actually on the Israeli side, okay, that I also was speaking to, and he was saying, "Oh my God, my sister's been killed," and that was for the same war on the same day, and I'm talking to both of them through Messenger. So that's actually one thing I do remember that was actually going on. And it's interesting that you say that the world got smaller. You'd never be able to have that conversation, okay, ever, prior to the year 2000. You'd never be able to have that conversation. So
Can I ask?
that was one thing that I think that changed.
I didn't do research on this, but forgive me for this. And to our viewers and subscribers, please educate me. Who was our prime minister in Australia back then?
That would have been John
John
Howard.
Howard.
I had a feeling
Um,
he was our prime minister then.
yeah.
Yeah, John Howard was our prime minister right up until 2007.
He was, I think, the second longest serving prime minister of Australia.
That's right.
I think he was too.
And then Kevin Rudd came after him. Then
And then Julia Gillard, then
Gillard.
Kevin Rudd, then
Kevin Rudd was before her.
No, yeah.
yeah, that's what I said. I said Kevin Rudd, then Julia Gillard, then Kevin Rudd again. See?
Oh, okay. So, and then you had Tony
It was
Abbott.
a bad time.
Then
Then
you
we
had
had
Tony Abbott.
Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, and then
Scott Morrison.
Scott Morrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the combination.
Yeah. Next question. Was music and the arts more influential than it is now? And I want to answer this one, and that is yes, because if you remember back in 2000, my favorite boy band of all time, the Backstreet Boys, did a video clip called I Want It That Way, and it was done in an airport hangar. And long story short, you had it was one of the most popular video clips and song, and you had Blink 182 who did the song
A parody of that.
A parody of that, and an airport hangout with all the small things. And I think they made they made that so influential and they were so popular. They still are. And the fact that they could spoof that and sort of the Backstreet Boys saw it and had a good laugh at it and, sort of they loved it. And I think it sort of reflected how we look at pop stars, how we look at video clips. I mean, back then you were looking at, it went from complete innocence to, sort of a little bit more sort of, with a little bit more spice, because the last time I said a word, I got in trouble for it, with a little bit more spice than usual. But I think Blink-182 made it influential because you had the Backstreet Boys, you had Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, you had NSYNC, Justin Timberlake, you had, Eminem, Boyz II Men, you had, it was, and Eminem was so
The
influential.
2000s put Eminem on the map, really.
Yeah.
1990, was it 1997 or something like that when he came up with that
The
song,
Real
My
Slim
Name Is?
Shady came out.
That
in
was a good
2000.
parody.
The Real Slim Shady came out in 2000.
Oh, yeah. That was a really clever. He started coming up with some really clever videos.
Yeah,
I thought that one was a good one. That the Real Slim Shady was a brilliant video. But I think probably the master of the music videos would have been Weird Al Yankovic before that,
Yes.
because he had some tremendous parody work. He did a parody of Nirvana's Smells Like Nirvana back in 93. He also did a parody of American Pie in 1999 called The Saga Begins, which was a tribute to Star Wars. That was probably my all-time favorite video when it comes to that kind of stuff. And also something else. There was another type of music video that came out around 1999, 2000, and that was the animation cut. That was really the animations one, like Eiffel 65.
Yes.
Blue came out in 1999. Move Your Body came out in 2000. So there was a couple of years where there was some really good animations, music videos.
The Crazy Frog.
Crazy Frog. I think I was around 2005, I believe. I'm thinking.
But do you know what? I think as well as I just said, Blink-182 spoofed I Want It That Way. Weird Al Yankovic actually made another spoof, which is I found it on eBay. And it was the most hilarious thing you could ever hear. What a genius, Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah, I love Weird Al Yankovic. He's a great
genius.
And I love, it's funny actually because Nirvana, who wrote It Smells Like Teen Spirit, basically
I praised it.
Actually what they did say was this. It said I really hate this guy because he took our song and then wrote a better song.
If I remember right, I think Kurt Cobain was hesitant at first, like, is this going to be about food? If I remember right, because it seemed to be every parody that he did was somewhere about food. But that wasn't what happened in that one. But that's why it worked, because it was just completely different. Yeah. And by the way, Crazy Frog's Axel Foley was back in 2005, as I thought.
Okay, so I was way behind. Next question. What were our biggest fears in the year 2000? And we're talking about Y2K. Do you remember when they said we need to start boiling our water in the year 2000 because the sewers had something wrong with it or something? We had to boil water to be able to drink it.
Yeah, and then they
I remember that. That was like Giardia stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was Giardia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I believe that's what it was called. We had to boil the water just to clear it.
Yeah.
Actually, I do remember that everyone was predicted that the year 2000 was going to be the end of the world. And what happened in my suburb in Gladesville was, so in my suburb in Gladesville, you've actually got a few churches. So you have an Anglican church in Gladesville, and you've got a Catholic church in Gladesville, and you also have a Protestant or Anglican church in Gladesville called Christ Church. And so what happened that night on the Y2K was there's something in the Bible that basically says the end of the world will start between two churches. And so everyone was packed between those two, between Christ Church and the other church across the street, because they thought the end of the world was actually going to happen for real. I mean, I kind of laugh at that because I was like, well, you just kind of missed like the greatest party of the year to go to church. But I mean, what they do is their business, I suppose. I mean, but no, that was a real thing that actually happened. People were afraid of it.
And the dirty water and the boiling of the water, and
But what I found funny about that is that people boil water for tea anyway. So I could just imagine that all the cafe baristas and stuff like that would have made so much money that night. It's called boiled water.
Next question. Did we protest more in the year 2000 than we did more than any other period of time? Did we protest more in the year 2000 than we did more than any other period of time?
I don't actually know. I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but
don't say anything that you shouldn't say.
Okay, well, what's the point then? I had a teacher who I simply just don't remember his name right now, because when I went to TAFE to do a diploma for welfare and community services, and he told me that he was a union leader, right? And he would have union strikes literally over basically anything, people would have strikes over the color of toilet paper, for example, so they could just basically go down to the pub and basically get a drink until the color of the toilet paper was changed. And he would also tell me about how there was this one time where the milk basically ran out in the staff cafeteria or whatever. And so basically everyone had a strike based off that. So if you're saying that you had more strikes during the year 2000, yes, there were more strikes during the year 2000 because people would go on strike for the most ridiculous reasons anyway, just to go down to the pub.
What do you think?
I definitely agree. I think there was more protests. It's hard to say. Like Buckets originally said, there was a few protests, but there wasn't as many, I think, until maybe the late 2000s. But I remember a few major protests in the early 2000s, like the big worldwide protest against the world's involvement in the Afghanistan war.
Oh yeah, I was part of that. I went on that.
You remember there was even a video that was directed by Michael Moore, who came up with that Fahrenheit 911, and he directed the System of a Down video called Boom, right? And what it was video footage of protests all over the world against the Afghanistan war that we were dragged into.
Actually, yeah, I do remember that. I think the numbers for that particular war against were 99% against in Australia, and John Howard took us to war anyway. And
that was probably one of the more uglier protests, because it wasn't so much a violent protest, it was a peaceful protest, but the reasoning why we went there was the big problem. But back in the late 2000s and ever since then, there's been protests after protests for the most trivial BS.
Yeah, there has. I remember there was one protest I went to, which was the I think it was work choices I went to. I remember going to that protest, and I loved it because even though I was unemployed during that time, I got to basically walk on Victoria Road all the way down George Street to Circular Quay. So it was a great exercise for me, even though I didn't have a job. I was a part of that one, and I was against the idea of work choices. And I basically, I just remember how massive that actually was. And you know what? I remember that a lot of political groups started popping up from that as well. Like, for example, the Socialist Alliance, that started to pop up and gain popularity. And there are also other alliances as well that were beginning to pop up that you probably wouldn't even think of voting up today. But yeah, I do remember those protests, and you know, even though I went there to get some exercise, it did create change, kind of thing.
Next question. With the birth of reality TV shows, was it better or worse than now? I think for me, I would say reality TV shows were better then than they are now, because
I definitely agree.
they were more
Now it's just
they were more funnier, they were more sort of controversial. They're more like you're sitting on the edge of your seat. I mean, the birth of Big Brother didn't start till 2001, but you're talking about the real world, and you're talking about like stuff on MTV, and you know, like reality. You know, when it came to reality TV, it was much more sort of addictive, sort of much more. What's going to happen next? Oh my god, I need to download it off the computer or download it off the internet to watch the next video clip. And I think it was better then than it is now.
Well, I just remember when reality television came out, that was kind of like a new thing for us, kind of thing. I mean, I do remember a show called The House from Hell, which Denton made. Do you remember him?
Who?
Denton?
Andrew Denton.
Andrew Denton?
Yes, Andrew Denton. So he created a show called The House from Hell, which you weren't allowed to leave. Unlike Big Brother, where people get voted out and they want to stay, he created a house with 6 people where you weren't allowed to leave and see what would happen.
I was busy watching The Real World on MTV.
And that was a great show because they couldn't leave and they had to do everything and they had to fight.
And that came out originally back in 1998.
That's true. And the thing is, that one television show pretty much started the reality television craze, because after
I probably agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because after you had that, you had Survivor. After that, you had Big Brother. After that, you had MasterChef. After that, you had all these other really great shows that started purely based off the idea that here are these basically unknown people that wouldn't normally be famous unless they made them famous, that are just regular people and having to deal with the game itself, and became famous due to reality TV. And that was like a new type of media for people, and that was quite the novelty. Now it's different. It's people are used to it. It's not as
we didn't have social media back in the day when it came to reality TV, so we couldn't sit on our computers and go on MySpace or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and tweet about it, or Instagram or Facebook or MySpace to our friends or to ourselves.
Well, we kind of did. So we had
MySpace in 2003.
Yeah, but not in 2000.
Well, actually, I'd disagree with that. So we didn't have social media like we know it today. We didn't have Facebook, but we did have 9MSN, and that was massive. Okay,
MSN Messenger.
Yeah.
MSN Messenger.
So
when I talk about social media, I talk about platforms. I don't talk. We
actually had Facebook in 2004.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is 2000, the year 2000. Right. Back in that day, we didn't have social media platforms. We had MSN Messenger, yes, and AOL.
We had Microsoft Internet Relay Chat as well. That was MIR. That was known as MIRC back in then.
We didn't back in the year 2000, exactly the year 2000. We didn't have social media platforms to talk to each other about. Oh, did you watch this program? And it's really, really good. Even though we had AOL, we had Messenger. We had Yahoo Messenger. Sort of back then, social media platforms.
I tell you what we did have. We did have the code to make your own ICUs, so you could basically create your own chat networks off your own pages. And I also remember how easy it was just to literally create your own page just off the cuff. All you needed was a background, effectively, and an address, and that was it. And that's all you needed. So I just remember, like, you could literally create a website in 2 minutes if you wanted to. So
next question is, should it be part of the curriculum to teach children about the year 2000? I would say yes, that needs to be part of their school curriculum. Every child and every young teen, every young adult needs to learn about the year 2000 and what happened exactly in the year 2000. and what we can learn from it now.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I agree. I mean, like, there's so many things that that started in the year 2000 that has effectively evolved into what we now know today as reality. And to forget that past, honestly, is a mistake.
It's like
Because
erasing it.
yeah, I don't want to have to erase the past, because if we erase the past, then we don't learn from our mistakes.
Exactly.
And I think that it should, what we went through the year 2000, we should be teaching to children, purely because you know, they need to learn what took off what we now know as modern day Australia or modern day world.
Because if you notice, we have millennials, and millennials, if you say to them, do you remember the year 2000, or do you know anything about the year 2000? They'll tell you, no, never even heard of it. And we need to teach our young children and our nephews and nieces and cousins, and we need to teach school students and millennials what the year 2000 entailed and what it was and how it worked, and what fear it instilled in us, and how we overcame it, and what the foods, the trends, the excitement, as if to say, of the year 2000. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I think these millennials, they need to learn about our past, because it seems to be that everybody seems to be doing a good job these days in erasing our history, and that shouldn't be happening. People need to understand our history, so they can compare it to what they have now. But I don't believe it should be happening. At the erasure of our history, that bugs the hell out of me, because there's so many things that I know that we've all done in the past. It's like it never existed.
Yeah.
Well, obviously it has existed because we lived it.
Yeah.
Actually, do you know what I actually do remember? Actually, I remember the year 2000 was like the year where the word nerd used to be a bad word. It used to be a stigmatized word. And then all of a sudden in the year 2000, all the nerds were like rock stars, and all the hackers were like the new bad boys. And that's actually something I remember about the year 2000s, is that people redefined what the word nerd actually meant, because IT technology specifically, it's really started to integrate into our culture. And we kind of become such a part, now it's become such a part of our culture that without it, we simply can't cope. So all of a sudden, nerds became everyone's joke into, well, everyone's savior. And that's actually something I remember in the year 2000 that actually changed.
That's true.
I don't know what other part of history that would ever happen where a stereotype can automatically just turn into a rock star, but it certainly happened with the nerds.
Okay, last question now. If you could go back into the year 2000, right? Just into the year 2000, what memorabilia would you want to get from then, bring back now, and show our nephews and nieces, and show the millennials, show the teens of today, the adults of today, show the world of today, this is what we had in the year 2000, this is how this worked, because, memorabilia is so like sentimental. So if you could go back and collect one or two items, what would it be?
Do you want to go first?
No, you can go first, mate. Take your time.
Somebody cue that.
I'm just trying to.
No, it's not a silly question. It just takes a while to think.
No, I'm just trying to think, because you say one or two items.
Or a few items. If you could get a few items there.
Can I get something like a storage unit to collect all my items? Because there's a lot of items that I'm thinking of.
I think I'd bring back the CD player.
Oh, well, the CD player. Well, you mean like the CD Walkman or something? Is that what you're thinking?
The circle thingy.
the CD Walkman. That's what
Yeah.
I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely bring that back for sure because I've got a box. I am not kidding you. I have a box in my wardrobe. It is full of CD singles from the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s. That's because I became a really avid music collector between the late 90s and the mid 2000s. I'm still kind of a collector now, but I've got absolutely tons of music. I've got tons of CD singles here. Maybe we need to bring back the Walkman. Right now we've got CD-ROMs, but not the
I would also
Walkman. We need to
bring
bring it
back.
back.
I would also bring back the brick phone, the mobile brick phone.
Oh God, I'm never. Bringing
Oh yes, yes. The brick phone. I love the brick phone. I used to
I
have
didn't
one.
have that.
Wasn't the brick phone back in the 70s, that huge brick phone?
Yeah, but I'm talking about the mobile. You know, the first brand new Nokia that they brought out. That looked like a brick
thought that
phone.
was the
It had an
90s.
antenna on the top of it.
I thought that was the mid 90s, wasn't it? That
No,
Motorola
no, it was.
mobile phone.
Not sure it was one. I think it was. I remember a Nokia one. Can you fact check that?
Yeah, sure. Nokia mobile phone models. Yeah, this is really great. We're learning on the fly here. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it in time,
remember having
but
a
I'll
Nokia
continue
one.
looking through it and we'll
I
have
had
an
a
answer.
Nokia one, and it had an antenna on it. And I remember it had the buttons on it, and you could turn it on, and you could only send a message and play snakes on it. And it was before the smaller version of the Nokia. It was actually the brick one, and you could change the face of it.
The skin.
Yeah, the skin of it.
Oh, that was the Nokia. That was the Nokia. The small ones. They were this big. I had one.
Yeah, those ones.
I used to have a small flip gray. Used to have a small gray flip one back in the late 90s.
Apparently they're unbreakable, you know.
I would bring back a computer, one of those gangly computers, the box computers.
Oh yes.
with the not the floppy disk, but not the one with the circle and the actual hardware that goes actual into the computer. Oh, I'd also bring back that TV with the DVD they used to have in the AV room at school.
The what?
The TV video VCR thing, the TV with the VCR.
Oh, okay.
In school, remember in the AV room?
Yes.
They used to make us watch off that TV video.
Oh yes, we used to have one at the old school as well, where there used to be a VCR with a TV. Yes, I get that one. That one. If I was to bring back something, I would bring back the old PlayStation 2 because I used to be a boss at that.
Do you know what I'd bring?
I know you could still get it, but still, I would rather have the old authentic one.
If I was to pick something that I probably can't get today, it would be the tickets to the Olympic Games where Kathy Freeman came first and got gold. That's what I'd bring back, because I know that I was working at Olympic Stadium when that race actually did happen. But I wish I actually got to see it. Because instead I was basically working behind the bar serving drinks.
Yeah, I would bring something back from the Olympic Games.
Yeah,
I should have just bought something and kept it as memorabilia in my box, but I didn't, and I'm really, really, really kicking myself for that one.
What about the torch? We should have just bring back
the torch.
We'll take the torch.
We'll take the torch.
We'll take the torch. You know, because
you can't take the torch because the feds will be after you.
The
feds will be after you 20 years later.
They're not going to know.
We're going backwards.
Yeah, we're going backwards. You know.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's no temporal prime directive yet.
But I'd also bring back clothing and food. Like I really want to bring back the different shoes, the different clothing, the foods. I think that would be really, really interesting.
You know what? That's a good idea because I remember, I think it would have been in the early 2000s or something along those lines, where I think I was at Parramatta Westfield or something like that. And there was some sort of draw. I think it was Parramatta Westfield. And I'd actually won one of those white colored ski jackets or something like those lines. I had like multicolors on each side, It almost looked like space like. It was just unreal. It was one of my favorite jackets and I lost it. But that was one of my faves. Anyway,
I think I
I bring that back.
I think I bring back food and clothes.
Actually, if I was to bring an article of clothing, what I would bring back is the original Tigers logo of the original Tiger that they had, because they changed it, right, to make it look more futuristic, I think. But to be honest, I actually liked the old logo of the Balmain Tigers rather than the West Tigers, because it actually looked and felt like a real animal, as opposed to a 3D item. So that's something I actually would bring back.
The final thing I'd bring back is election results of Australia. I would have the names and the election results in a frame.
Yeah, she's gonna go down. She's gonna create her own almanac or something like that and
Yeah, that's
start
what
betting
you're
on
gonna
betting on the elections.
Yeah, that's what you get.
You.
That would have come so handy, because people were actually betting on the politics back then. That's actually
Also,
when political
We
betting.
still are these
Also-
days.
Also, I would take a photo of who was the president of the United States of America in that time frame.
Okay, well,
What, George
let's look
W.
like
Bush?
George W. No, that was George. Was it George W.
W.
Bush?
Bush, yeah.
Why would
It was
he's an
George
arsehole.
W.
Why would you want him? He was a complete nut. Everyone wanted to assassinate that guy. Why?
Don't say that out loud. Don't say that out
Oh
loud.
my God, he's terrible. Why would you want to bring him back?
I want to watch the election again and just see if they actually. I wonder to this day if they actually, just before you go, I wonder if they actually are they able to find the number of ballots that they lost in that election or threw away or something, because I remember there was something that happened.
Wasn't that the election between George W. Bush and Al Gore?
Yes.
Yeah, for which Al Gore lost. Unfairly.
Wasn't there legal challenges all the way right
There
up until they gave
there
up?
was, but Al Gore conceded to George Bush. So
Yeah, so like what happened was, like Kat said, he did concede, but he conceded for a very good reason. So even though he could have won, the reason why he didn't challenge it, because he was worried about future elections using that technique to rig
The result.
rig the results, which is basically what Donald Trump tried to do as well. And I could just imagine with Al Gore challenging the results and winning. Okay, that if he had won that, then Donald Trump would have challenged the results, and there could have been a really good case for him to win the last election. So I think he kind of respected democracy enough not to challenge it and just to accept it and go home. So well done, Al Gore.
anyways, that's about it for tonight. Final thoughts on the year 2000, the year that was.
I'm utterly disappointed.
Bye. Oh, sorry.
I'm utterly disappointed that I don't have flying cars. I know I said it before,
I agree with that one.
but that's all I have to say about that.
Anyway,
Meet that Philip. Dun 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 dun. His wife Kat. Dun 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 dun.
Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you next Thursday night on the next topics. I'm Kat. This is Buckets. And then don't forget, please subscribe, like, comment. Also, we have a Facebook page. We now have a Twitter page, twitter.com/cat_podcast. Make sure you follow us there. We'll follow you back and let you know what's happening with that. And on our Facebook page, if there's a topic you'd like to do, let us know. Don't forget, there is PAX Australia. For anyone out there who's going through a hard time in lockdown, PAX Australia provides a great package for counselling. Hit them up on their group page, PAX Australia, and speak to the CEO, and he'll be able to put a package deal together for you. And it's strictly confidential and private, and it is over Zoom, and you're well looked after and cared for. And it is just amazing to get things off your chest. And yeah, just go to PAX Australia if you need.
Excellent.
Thanks, Leon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.